Pitch Black, released in 1999, was a small sci-fi film with a script based on director David Tui's unused script for Alien 3. Because the budget for Pitch Black was only $20 million, Universal Pictures seriously considered releasing the movie straight to video. However, the overwhelmingly positive reception from test audiences convinced the studio to give it a wide release. Furthermore, the studio allocated an additional $3 million for special effects. The film's box office results were modest. It grossed slightly more than $50 million. The studio would probably have forgotten about Richard Riddick, but everything changed when the film was released on media a few months later. The video and DVD release of Pitch Black turned it into a major hit, bringing Universal Pictures $90 million in net profits. The audience loved the film, especially its main character. Universal Pictures executives started thinking about expanding Pitch Black into a franchise. After the film's success on home video, studio management promptly approached Vin Diesel and director David Tui with a proposal to urgently release a sequel. As Vin Diesel's career was skyrocketing in the early 2000s, the studio assured they would spare no expense on a new film. Initially, the studio wanted Diesel and Tui to make a direct sequel to the story. In other words, they expected Riddick to simply end up on another hostile planet and try to survive by fighting some new creatures. The studio ordered several different scripts. David Tui worked on one version, and David Hayter and Akiva Goldsman were hired to create two more. One of the scripts was a prequel to Pitch Black, focusing on the war that Richard Riddick was drafted into. As a result of his leadership mistakes, he faced a loss of his entire platoon and was held responsible for the deaths of the fighters, resulting in a large bounty on his head. Naturally, it was a setup, and he was actually innocent. The plot revolved around the pursuit of Riddick by Hunter Johns, played by Cole Hauser in Pitch Black. The script showed the transformation of Vin Diesel's character into a criminal from Pitch Black. Many believe that the studio and Vin Diesel should have selected this script to work on. One more script was created by David Hayter and Akiva Goldsman, with Hayter writing it and Goldsman providing polish. In that script, Riddick was forced to return to the planet from the first film to help mercenaries in their search for a certain Genesis device hidden in the caves. Among the mercenaries was the already grown-up girl from the last film. She despised Riddick and tried to kill him, serving as the main antagonist in the script. The action in the third script for the Chronicles of Riddick also partially unfolded on the planet from the first film. The creatures from Pitch Black grew sentient and sought vengeance on Riddick for his first visit to the planet. The revenge was orchestrated by the creature's leader, who'd failed to react in time to the bald threat in the first film. The characters planned to deal with the issue of the night, which comes every few years, using the already mentioned Genesis device. It seems like that device served as a sort of magic wand for the writers, addressing all questions like, how could this happen? One more script by Akiva Goldsman placed Riddick on a forest planet inhabited by predators, which served as a security system for, once again, the incredible Genesis device. The script also featured Kyra, also known as Jack, who had something of a romantic subplot with Riddick. Originally, Universal Pictures planned to adopt one of these scripts, but as mentioned earlier, Vin Diesel's career took off. In 2001, the release of the first Fast and Furious film catapulted Diesel to stardom. Just a year later, XXX hit theaters, solidifying his status as a superstar. Unlike other screenwriters, Diesel and Tui took a different approach. Instead of making a small film, they decided to expand the universe and establish a comprehensive lore. They presented Universal Pictures with three options for story development. All three scripts were quite similar, but differed in terms of scale. The decision to shift the plot away from Riddick's survival on some planet belonged to David Tui. He believed that the Riddick universe needed to move away from the influence of Alien and develop its own story. Because Diesel insisted on David Tui's script, the studio abandoned all other options in favor of Tui's most expensive one, with the hope of eventually turning it into a highly successful franchise. Director David Tui later said that the success of The Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars prequel trilogy worked to their advantage. According to him, the studio wanted to make something similar so badly that it was willing to pay them any price. At the time, Tui himself was unsure whether he would become the director of the sequel, as the studio was considering more esteemed individuals for the position, concerned that he might not be able to handle a large-scale film. Back then, Tui's filmography consisted of only two small films, The Arrival and Pitch Black. When Tui and Diesel got the green light for the Chronicles of Riddick, they rewrote the chosen script to include some scenes from other scripts. As a result, the studio had to increase its projected budget for the film. Vin Diesel put all of his efforts into the Chronicles of Riddick. During that time, the actor declined roles in Daredevil, Too Fast, Too Furious, and XXX State of the Union. Diesel, however, said in one of his interviews that the Chronicles of Riddick wasn't the only reason for his refusal to appear in the second Fast and Furious. Although both films were being developed by Universal Pictures, who could move up filming schedules to allow Diesel to star in both films, the actor and the studio had completely different visions for the second Fast and Furious. The studio wanted to create a franchise similar to Lethal Weapon or Die Hard, with each new film unrelated to the previous ones. Vin, in turn, wanted the film's plot to focus on family. The casting for Chronicles of Riddick was mostly smooth, except for one problem. Australian actress Rhianna Griffith, who played Jack in the first film, wanted to return to her role in the Chronicles of Riddick as Kyra, and even passed the first round of auditions. Vin Diesel supported the idea of bringing her back into the film. He met with the actress after her auditions and told her she had to get in shape to look tougher on screen. Griffith got a workout plan and a personal trainer. However, the main role eventually went to Alexa Davalos. Some suggest that because Griffith had less than 3 weeks to prepare, she simply couldn't get the results she needed. To save money, the studio decided to film in Canada. Given the significant scale required for the movie, US studio stages, already occupied by numerous other productions, might not have accommodated the film, potentially resulting in additional expenses. Instead, the movie was filmed in a huge warehouse in British Columbia, formerly owned by the company Sears. The film crew quickly built a set in the warehouse. In terms of the scale of filming and the number of people involved in production, the Chronicles of Riddick set a record in Canada. No one had ever shot such large films there before. Moreover, at one point the production was the third largest user of electricity in the country. Setting aside the fact that the film's budget exceeded $100 million, the filming process of the Chronicles of Riddick went quite smoothly. The problem started when the studio received a rough cut of the film for review. Poor test screenings prompted Universal Pictures to send the film for additional filming. Vin Diesel and director David Twohy were urgently ordered to change the film's rating from R to PG-13. That's why some scenes in the film had excessive flickering and flashing lights. Later, some of the cut material made it into the director's cut of the film, but since the studio refused to spend extra money on special effects, most of the scenes remained omitted. The Chronicles of Riddick hit theaters in the summer of 2004. The movie was a complete failure, resulting in the cancellation of multiple sequels that had already been written. Despite a $110 million budget, the movie only grossed $57 million at the American box office. Its worldwide earnings were approximately the same. For comparison, Pitch Black grossed $40 million in 2000 on a $23 million budget. Universal Pictures was only able to recoup half of their filming expenses. Vin Diesel's career suffered a major setback, leading him to star in the comedy The Pacifier. Diesel's dream project, the epic Hannibal the Conqueror, suffered as well. Had the Chronicles of Riddick been a success, the studio would have surely put it into production. However, after making headlines for a while, the film ended up buried beneath a bunch of mid-2000s historical film failures. The studio was deeply disappointed with the Chronicles of Riddick. As a result, when Diesel agreed to make a cameo in the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, in exchange for the rights to Chronicles, the studio readily gave them up. Because the test screenings for Tokyo Drift went poorly, the studio decided not to argue with Diesel to minimize potential losses. In addition to gaining the rights to Chronicles, Diesel also secured producer roles in the Fast and Furious franchise. That's why failures of any of his other films no longer pose a threat to him. The third installment of Riddick's adventures, released in 2013, was largely funded by Vin Diesel. Only $15 million of the film's $38 million budget was invested by the studio, and even that amount was influenced by Diesel. The remaining $23 million was invested by Diesel himself. The actor even had to mortgage his house to finish filming. Due to insufficient funding, production on the film was halted multiple times. Vin Diesel used his own money to cover the salaries of the cast and crew members while also applying for bank loans. Despite a $38 million budget, the film grossed nearly $100 million at the box office, which is quite decent. However, it appears that the film failed to cover its marketing costs. As a result, the fourth installment has still not been released after over 10 years, despite Vin Diesel having a script for it. He has already shown it to the public several times, confidently claiming that Richard Riddick will return. The question is when. By the way, unlike the unfortunate The Chronicles of Riddick, the computer game released alongside it was a huge success, garnering numerous awards and nominations at various ceremonies. In the year of its release, its competitors were the second Half-Life and the third Doom. Thanks for watching, subscribe and stay tuned.